Today's video is on the Nutty Putty Cave incident. Out of all the many ways you can die, this young man's death would have been one of the worst ways possible. If you're claustrophobic, you may find this story hard to listen to. John Edward Jones was 26 years old. He was recently married and was the father of a young daughter. He was also a medical student at the University of Virginia. Growing up in Utah, John's childhood was outdoorsy, as his father used to take John and his brother camping and exploring, and in particular, exploring the surrounding caves. On a break from university, John had returned to Utah to spend some quality time with his family, and on the evening of the 24th of November 2009, just a few days before Thanksgiving, John, along with 9 other friends and family members, decided to explore Nutty Putty Cave. Nutty Putty Cave is a horizontal shaped cave that spans 1,355 feet in length and about 145 foot depth. It's located in Utah County, west of Utah Lake. The cave was discovered in 1960 by caver Dale Green. Local ranchers directed Dale to the top of the nearby hill, in which a small pit was found that was housing several snakes. Though the cave location was known to the ranchers, it had yet to be entered. Dale recalled that following a short climb down and a tight belly crawl, the cave opened up to a gradually sloping downward passage. The cave is split up into 7 sections: the crack, the big room, the maze, the big slide, the birth canal, the aorta crawl, and last but not least, Vein Alley. Well known for narrow passageways, slippery twists and turns, tight squeezes, the cave's popularity grew over the years, getting around 5,000 visitors a year from explorers and Boy Scout groups. Although John had lots of caving experience, most of it was done when he was younger and a lot smaller in size. On that particular evening, they arrived at the cave around 8 PM. For the first hour exploring the cave, everything was going well. The group had explored the largest room in the cave, the big slide. Not long after that, John, his brother Josh, and 2 friends decided to take up the challenge of passing through the birth canal, a difficult and narrow passageway which at the end opens up to a larger room. John went first. He wriggled forward. Not seeing the large room, he edged forward still, but the narrow passage did not come to an end. Instead, the squeeze made a sharp downward turn. John still pressed forward, possibly noting the tunnel got wider at the bottom, but it was already too late. John hadn't entered the birth canal. He'd accidentally entered Ed's Push, which is right next to the birth canal. Ed's Push doesn't lead to a larger room like the birth canal. In fact, it doesn't lead anywhere. Ed's Push has 4 small passageways, but none of them big enough that a 6-foot man could fit through. John, not realising it, had pushed forward until he couldn't move, and to make things worse, he'd wriggled into a crack that just went nearly straight down, which made him unable to turn back on his own. The small cranny John was trapped in measured only 10 by 18 inches. Since John's brother Josh was following him, he was the first to find him stuck. Josh, distressed seeing how stuck John was, tried to pull him out, but only managed to inch him up a slight bit. As soon as he let John go, he slid right back into the crevice. John was stuck with one hand pinned underneath him, and the other forced backward. His ankles and feet were free, but they were of little use as gravity pushed him down. Both being devout Mormons, they said a quick prayer. "Guide us as we work through this," Josh prayed. "Save me for my wife and kids," John said. Josh slowly wiggling out of the tight passage and rushing to the surface. Once outside, he quickly called for help, while their friend stayed with John to comfort him. The first person to arrive to help, a woman named Susan, who was a local rescue volunteer, immediately dropped everything she was doing when she received the message on a rescue pager and rushed to the scene in her Toyota. She arrived sometime around midnight. It was now more than 3 hours since John had been trapped deep inside the cave. Since Susan was small in stature and experience, it took her no time to reach John. Within the next few hours, a few dozen rescuers had arrived on the scene. They decided to use a rescue rope, with one rope tied around John's legs and the other end pulled by the team. At the same time, they also tried drilling away chunks of rock near John, but the hard material and awkward position made drilling slow and excruciating work. In over an hour, they'd only managed to drill through a couple of inches of rock. The position of John's body also complicated things. He was trapped upside down. Only his feet were visible to the rescuers, and the ceiling above the feet hangs so low that the rescuers couldn't just pull him out as his feet would get in the way. Everything was made more difficult by how narrow the cave was. Even though there was a large team of rescuers, volunteers, emergency service workers, and a rescue helicopter, only one person could directly access John. Meanwhile, John was starting to do worse. He'd now been stuck upside down for a long time, and having some difficulty breathing, and his heart had to work twice as hard against gravity to push up the continuous blood flow out of his brain. He was going back and forth between panic and calmness. The rescuers brought a two-way radio into the cave and managed to lower it to him so he could speak with his wife, who was near the cave entrance on the surface. They were both agitated but comforted each other. John had now been trapped upside down for 19 hours. Things started to look better when the rescue team had installed their pulley system and started pulling John out. An 8-man team was slowly moving him up. Then as the rescue team pulled John upward for the 4th time, something happened. The entire team fell backward as the rope suddenly went loose in their hands. The closest rescuer felt something hard hit his face and he passed out for a second. When he came to, he saw nothing but dust. Once the dust had settled a bit, he realised the stone arch in John's legs where the rope was tied around had shattered, and the nearest key bolt had broken off. He couldn't make out in the dust exactly where John was, but he soon realised. John had slid right down into the crevice again, this time seemingly even deeper than before. As the rescuer suffered severe facial injuries from the impact and couldn't continue his rescue efforts, he had to switch places with his dad, who was also on the rescue team. When he reached John, he realised that John's breathing was much more shallow and less frequent. The rescuer called for John, but received no response. Desperate, he tried to lower himself into the crevice to put the rope around John's waist, but he got stuck himself. After finally wriggling himself free, he drilled a new hole for the pulley and crawled out of the cave exhausted, to be replaced by yet another rescuer who reached John but couldn't make contact with him. Soon after, a medical professional crawled into the cave and reached John. At midnight, November 25th, John was pronounced dead, tragically only 26 years old. A total of 137 rescuers worked hard for 27 hours to save John, but they had to leave the tragic site with empty hands and heavy hearts. One of them told the media that this was his toughest rescue in his 29 years of being a search and rescue volunteer. The very next day, the authorities determined that it was too difficult and dangerous to get his body out of the cave, so Nutty Putty Cave will forever remain the final resting place for John Edward Jones. The following week, public authorities decided to close Nutty Putty Cave to the public permanently. It has been sealed ever since. John's family had a plaque put at the entrance of the cave, in his memory. In 2016, filmmaker Isaac Halasima produced and directed a full-length feature film about the life and failed rescue of John Jones. It's called The Last Descent. It gives an accurate glimpse of John's ordeal and what it feels like to be trapped in the most narrow of cave passageways, and when claustrophobia and then hopelessness sets in. Sadly, John left behind his wife Emily and their baby daughter Lizzie. Emily was also expecting their second child at the time, a boy who was born the following year and is named after his dad. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. If you haven't already, hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next video.